Okay, good morning, everybody. You're all very welcome to this morning's webinar on all things Droplet. Just while we're waiting for the next few attendees to join, I just want to go over a quick introduction. My name's Sean. I'm the Market and Events Manager at Jera IT. You've joined this webinar if you're still using legacy applications or operating systems. Chances are you do have some concerns about the security of the practice. We're here to talk you through some use cases of our latest partner solution, Droplet, and how you could use it in your business to reduce costs, deliver services, and ensure that you're up to date with all the latest government cybersecurity standards. We do have time set aside at the end for questions, so don't be shy. Shout them out if you've got them, and we'll answer as many of them as possible towards the end. Without further ado, I'm going to pass you along to Derek at Droplet, who's going to walk you through some of the features of the solution, as well as some use cases. And followed by that, we're going to have a technical demo by Droplet's Chief Technical Officer, Michelle Laverick, who will give you a little demonstration of the product and take your questions. So Derek, I'm going to let you take over here.
Thanks very much, Sean. So thanks for joining this morning's webinar. As you can tell from the accent, I'm based north of the border. I look after our Scottish clients and our Scottish partners. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to help share with you why customers choose Droplet Computing, but more importantly, what makes us different through the eyes of three different people within your organisation. So, for example, procurement, IT, and CISO. So since COVID, many organisations are looking at reducing costs, mobilising staff, whilst ensuring that they're up to date with the latest government cybersecurity standards, such as Cyber Essentials. However, in April last year, IASME raised the bar of Cyber Essentials, and they brought in some new features that weren't around before, such as any software that's out of support must be removed or isolated away from any devices that are in scope. And that includes both end devices and servers. So if you add to that as well, just in the last few months, we've had Microsoft as an example, announcing end of support for Server 2012. And as of October next year, we're looking at Windows 10 going end of life. Both of these can be announcements can be a major hurdle for IT that can incur a financial and security impact. So let's take a look at why customers choose Droplet, and more importantly, share with you how we're helping our existing customers with the very same challenges. So Droplet is a software which is based on containerization. We enable our users to remotely access Windows x86 apps across a wide range of operating systems and cloud platforms, in a similar way to traditional VDI, application packaging and app streaming. This is exactly where Droplet would sit in the solution stack. We deliver applications to endpoint devices. Now let's take a look at what makes Droplet different. So every Droplet license that's purchased has a full set of built-in tools, and security is at the heart of everything that we do at Droplet. And the tools that we provide are included at no extra cost. So for example, when Droplet is installed, we create an isolation layer between our container and the device that you install Droplet on. So Droplet is a container which is portable and supports any of the operating systems on the screen here. And we can take that container and put it into any of those operating systems. And when we create that isolation layer, it's critical when you look back at that last statement I made about Cyber Essentials. Any software out of scope must be removed or isolated away from the host operating system. That's exactly where we excel. We also include a firewall, which is locked down by default, blocking all inbound traffic. So again, adding extra security to how we deliver applications. And when we install Droplet at both the client side and the server side, we create an encrypted tunnel between both endpoint devices. We call this approach never trust. And a typical example of use cases for our customers is with our approach to application delivery and our dedication to security, we can actually lock down users and devices and lock down their user rights as well. So the only thing they can do is access the applications that they get access to. We can also, because we support many operating systems, and we're not dependent on hypervisors, for example, we can actually enable remote working from any place, anywhere. Out of the box, we're a very good solution for BYOD. Because again, if you look at the sheer volume of operating systems out there, we support any operating system. We can lock down the user and only give them access to the specific applications that they require. Really good use case of that is maybe a student in a university space coming in with their own device, or a contractor who's dialing in from maybe a Wipro or an Accenture, for example. So we have many different use cases across many different verticals, including e-health, education, manufacturing, utilities, and aerospace. Michelle will probably touch on some of those use cases in her demonstration. So again, our unique approach to application delivery, something again that Droplet it enables, is we deliver applications to end users to help you deploy our containers on a smaller footprint than you'd normally see in maybe a VDI world, for example. We help our clients reduce the amount of infrastructure, reduce the complexity in layers, and as a result, we also have an impact on the CO2 impact as well. More importantly, for an IT manager who's looking to simplify his environment, we have a single pane of glass to manage, deploy, and support those applications and those users through a single pane of glass. So you're not logging into multiple applications and multiple products. It's one single product with a low footprint and a low cost associated with it. And as touched on before, so if you look at the most recent version of Cyber Essentials, in this day and age, we're seeing many organizations being forced and driven towards a Cyber Essential accreditation. And in many instances, it may be a government standard that they must apply by. However, unfortunately, they're still running and relying on outdated software such as Windows 7, Server 2008, more recently 2012. Many of our customers have used Droplet because of our secure never trust model to enable them to achieve the highest levels of cyber certification, including up to Cyber Essentials Plus and NIST accreditation. So we also have a server version of our software. So that was the client side I discussed there. We also have a server-side edition for those applications that are dependent on Server 2000 to 2022. So we don't just do legacy, we do modern as well in both environments, whether it's client or server. We support Linux, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. We also support any hypervisor, which means we have tools that can strip out and clone an entire server and indeed an entire data center. We can clone and from physical to virtual, virtual to physical, and virtual or physical to cloud without changing the ones and zeros. And again, Michelle will discuss that in more detail in her demonstration, how we do that. That enables us to take those problem apps, and again, the container is portable, so we can take a clone of your existing environment and then put it wherever you want: Linux, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. Our Droplet server also includes the very same security tools that we support on our client side. So you get the same standards of security in the server side as you do in the client side. Typical examples of our Droplet server. Many organizations approach us because they're running software. It may be legacy, it may be bespoke, or it's like Windows Server 2012, where it's out of support now. They can't migrate, they don't have an upgrade option. They can't migrate to the latest version of Windows Server. So they have to rely on something that's old and unsupported, which is then in turn giving them compatibility challenges, and for the CISO security nightmares, and for the compliance manager, because they're running legacy software, there may be a financial burden associated with that. These are the type of challenges that we address out of the box for our server environments and data center environments. Next, John. And as our previous solution for client side, we again, if you think of, I'll just give a scenario here. If you think of, it may be a legacy 10-year-old application that was written for Windows Server 2003, for example. Back then, the servers that were in operation probably could only access maybe 4 cores and 16 gig of RAM. If you're putting that on a new Linux server today, you've got a lot more RAM and a lot more compute to access. Therefore, you could put that same infrastructure into a smaller footprint with more compute, reducing costs, reducing layers, reducing complexity, have an impact on the CO2 emission, and simplifying again the management of that. We also have that same security message in there from our Droplet Never Trust, which enables our clients to take, for example, 2008 and 2012 problems, move them into a Linux or an AWS or Azure environment, and because we're locking the solution down inside our secure container, help them achieve Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus even. So in summary, when our customers, we've had many customers who have done this, when we have a customer who has maybe a Windows 7 or a Windows 10 problem, or an application that was written for, let's say, Internet Explorer or an old version of Java, connecting to a Server 2012 database, when installed together on both client side and server side, we create an encrypted tunnel between both endpoint devices, locking down that user and protecting the environment against not only zero-day attacks, but man-in-the-middle attacks as well. And again, because of our approach, we reduce the complexity, the layers, and help our customers achieve the highest levels of certification around Cyber Essentials, which again could be a key driver for you. So what also makes Droplet very unique is, I'm going to show you a traditional layer. This will be familiar for all the IT security people on the call. So every data center has a number of layers of security, which has been around, this approach has been around for many, many years, and across 7 key layers in any environment. And many organizations we speak to, and I spoke to over the last 20 years, that could have as many as 4 or 5 different vendors, so such as Checkpoint, Palo Alto, F5, so many different technologies and vendors, which means you've got 4 or 5 different renewals, 4 or 5 different contacts, 4 or 5 different user interfaces, and very rarely will you have one product that talks to each other. Droplet is very unique in that our approach to security and our approach to application delivery, we actually sit across each and every single one of these layers. We have a unique message from controlling the end user right through to the actual device as well. So we touch on endpoint, network, application data, and the mission critical stuff. So sensitive data, out of date applications, etc. That's exactly what we excel at, and why many customers have used us to address the security challenges where they've got blockers in the past. So before I pass you over to Michelle, I just want to bring this slide back up again and just reiterate, hopefully I gave you a flavour of what Droplet is, how customers use this. But if you then take what I've just told you and relay it back into this slide, you'll understand how Droplet can help reduce costs, mobilize staff, do it securely. And from an IT manager's perspective, we can give you a single product, a single user interface, a single license, and a single point of contact to help you get more bang for your buck, simplify IT, reduce complexity, and more importantly, do it as securely as you can. So there will be a session at the end where we'll ask some questions and answer some questions. So feel free to put through some questions to John. And I'll now pass you on to Michelle, who'll give you a better understanding and a look and feel of what does Droplet look like and what it looks like under the hood. So over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what I want to do is begin with the kind of end user experience, because we're all about the end user, all about making sure whatever Droplet doesn't interfere with the user's day-to-day tasks. So here I have a Windows 11 machine. It's fair to say that most of our customers are still on Windows 10, but we are seeing Windows 11 creep into people's organizations as they buy new PCs, and those PCs have an OEM copy of Windows 11 on, and for licensing purposes, they choose to use that. On the endpoint, there is usually a Droplet client. Yeah, this is a very small client, which in our remote delivery model, the server model, is less than 100 megabytes in size. Yeah, for the most part, end users don't actually interact with this UI at all. We will create automatically on their desktop shortcuts. And if you're using any endpoint management tools, you can create these shortcuts however you wish. Yeah. And also, if you are delivering Droplet through another access control layer like Citrix or AVD, we can get out of the way and allow that be the main method by which they gain access to the application. Yeah. So if you're delivering a kind of non-desktop experience through a web page, Droplet seamlessly integrates with companies like Citrix and Microsoft AVD. So the users get an application on their desktop and they just double click and they get their application. Yeah, it's a seamless experience. So the user really has no idea that Droplet is running. I've picked applications here today which are very, very old, but also ones that you probably recognize because these are just the old versions of Microsoft Office. It's fair to say that most of the customer engagements I have are to do with a specific application to a particular market vertical, such as energy, water, aerospace, healthcare, retail, whatever. And in many cases, it's an application that is being heavily customized specifically for that organization. Yeah, so it tends not to be shrink-wrapped applications that come from a mainstream vendor like Microsoft. That said, we do have a lot of legal firms and a lot of finance accountancies and things like that who have plugins into old versions of Office, and those plugins do their entire workflow. But those plugins don't work with the latest version of Word or Excel or are easily broken. And so they still want to use an older version of Office. Yeah. Although we excel at delivering legacy applications, we can also deliver modern applications as well through the end user's experience. Yeah. So the modern applications work just as well in Droplet. I'd have to say, in most cases, when it's a modern application, it tends to be that modern application that needs 4 people in white coats to make it work. And there's a high anxiety that a Windows update will come along and break that application. Yeah. And then even higher anxiety that having made this work on our corporate build of Windows 10, we'll have to go through that nightmare all over again when Windows 11 comes out. So everybody's facing the barrel of the next Windows update. And as Derek correctly pointed out, all of these OSs are going to eventually go end of life. Another common reason why a modern application will end up running in Droplet is, although the application itself, the exe, may be compatible with Windows 10 or 11, it's surrounded by a host of APIs, development kits, package tools like Java or .NET, or Microsoft XML parser, and they fall foul of Cyber Essentials. Yeah, so it's rare that an application installs nowadays cleanly without dependencies to other APIs and other development tools. So that's the end user experience. Yeah, a secure client that can deliver the application. It's worth saying that the model I'm showing you here on screen, although you couldn't see it, is actually all being delivered remotely through the wire. We do have a model with our software where the container can actually run completely offline using the memory and CPU and disk resources of the local PC. Yeah, which is how Droplet got started some 6 years ago, delivering legacy applications to an endpoint without any need for any centralized infrastructure. And we still have a number of companies who still use that model. It's fully supported. We support both local and remote delivery. It tends to be used in environments where the customer can't rely on network delivery on its own. So the joke I always say is it's people out in a field, and I do mean literally in a field, where there's no 4G, no 3G, no Wi-Fi. We could still deliver an offline experience to those endpoints. Another common reason for using that local delivery is engineering environments, where we're working with engineers who have USB and serial devices, and they're almost working in a lab environment with hardware. Can be things like aerospace or manufacturing, or indeed automotive, and they need that kind of local delivery to allow themselves to function. So that's the end user experience. The key takeaway is we don't interfere or modify the application. Yeah, it gets installed to our container, and the application runs as it always has done, just in a secure, true isolation layer provided by Droplet. So let me show you what is going on in the back end of this environment and show you the server product. This is a big runaway success in Droplet. It's becoming the dominant way of which we deliver our experience. One of our biggest customers is an energy supplier here in the UK who delivers both conventional power and also nuclear. So we're offering working in a highly secured environment, and they have a quite large deployment of Droplet, and a very, very heavily regulated industry. The engagement with that energy supplier started 4 years ago and came to fruition just under a year ago. So these industries that we sometimes work with, they have to be very cautious about changes. So we're there for the long game, if you like. So this is the web front end for our server appliance. This particular container I'm showing you is a modern container used to deliver a modern application. So when I did a double click and ran something like Excel, where that was coming from was being delivered across the wire from this particular container. These containers are multi-session capable. Yeah. So unlike conventional VDI, where one user gets one desktop, which is trashed whenever they log off, creating a lot of IOPS on the backend storage, like conventional VDI would, our containers have more of a persistent state. They're up and running 24/7, 365. Yeah. And they can support many users connecting and delivering that application. So rather than having 100 users and 100 desktops, or 100 users and 100 differential clones, you have one Droplet container that supports those particular users. Yeah. So we're a scale up solution and we're a scale out solution. Yeah. So we can improve performance and increase the number of users who can connect simply by giving the container more memory and CPU. It is Windows after all. Or we can scale out the solution by having multiple appliances, something I'll talk about in a bit. This container that I've got is our legacy container. That we use to deliver a lot of legacy applications. Now, in this brief demo, I'm only really showing you two main container types that we use to deliver the client experience, the end user experience. We have a whole host of different flavors of container, going back to DOS, going back to, this predates my time with Droplet, OS2 Warp. So there isn't really a legacy environment that we can't run in the Droplet environment. You might be surprised to hear references to things like DOS or Windows XP, but it is still out there, especially if you work in the defense sector, where the shelf life of a lot of defense technologies have a factor of 20, 30, 40 years. Yeah. So they're out in the field, out in deployment for a very long time. Same with automotive and same with transportation. One of our engagements with a train company, for example, one of those engineers took out a circuit diagram that had 1986 written on it. That technology went onto the rails in 1992, and it's still on the train lines to this day. So there's an awful lot of legacy out there, some of it very deep, going back into multiple decades, and some of it a little bit more recent. Now, the other thing that was mentioned in Derek's presentation was our ability to not only deliver an end user experience, but also protect servers. So there's quite a split, really, if you think about it. You could use Droplet just for delivering a problem application to the end user, yeah, but you can also use it to protect legacy server infrastructures as well. So as an example of that, I've got a 2003 container and I've got a 2008 base container, yeah. Where did these containers come from? Well, they weren't built by us. They originally started their lives in VMware vSphere, and we have tools that can lift and shift a server-based environment, whether it's physical, whether it's virtual, whether that virtual platform is Hyper-V, or whether that virtual platform is VMware vSphere, or indeed if it's in a cloud layer. Yeah, there are some people who adopted Azure quite early, and they've got 2008 and 2012 in the cloud. Yeah, they may still want those environments to persist, but obviously there's no support for those operating systems in the cloud going forward from these cloud providers. The cloud providers, like the big software vendors, always want you on the latest and greatest code, always want you upgrading, yeah, but don't often appreciate how difficult and how costly that upgrade process can be. So we took these 2003 and 2008 systems and converted them, yeah, into a Droplet container. So we have a layer of security around the client experience and a layer of security around the server experience as well. A true isolation layer that protects both the client experience and the end user experience. So we can be, if you want us to be, a complete solution to the whole legacy debt kind of problem, yeah, not just the client side and the server side. And I'll let you into a bit of a secret. When the company was founded, we focused on the end user experience as an entry point into the data center. But we always knew that if there was a legacy client application, guess what? It spoke to an equally elderly legacy server backend. And the real prize for us was being able to help customers with both of those particular challenges. It's a route into the data center which might be very familiar to you from VMware. VMware got started with VMware Workstation, and then they developed the ESX product as their way in. And of course, where VMware really did well was with ESX. That's where the real kind of company was built. And we're taking a very similar strategy to move into the data center in that particular way. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the platforms that we support. As a former VMware person myself, I use vSphere to do my demos. Yeah, we don't say to any of our engineers or any of our salespeople what platform they use for their demos. We're completely neutral. So you can be on premises with vSphere or Hyper-V from Microsoft, or you can be in Azure, or you can be in AWS. We really don't care where Droplet runs. So we can be a facilitator for getting people into the cloud. If your organization has a policy of cloud first, or we want to turn off our data centers and get out of the job of running hardware and maintaining hardware and all the hassles that brings and bring everything into the cloud. One of the structurals of doing that is you can't take legacy into the cloud very easily, because as I just said, they want to always have you on the latest and greatest. But just to give you an idea of how the technology works, I've got an appliance here which is running in my lab environment. It won't be a surprise to anybody on this call, but the backbone of the Droplet server appliance is Linux. Yeah. So this Linux instance is custom built by us, super hardened to MOD and intelligence standards. You might have noticed in the media recently, we're being part of a program with the National Cybersecurity Centre, and we're kind of engaging more and more with the likes of GCHQ and our friends in the intelligence and military services. So Droplet hasn't reinvented the world by writing its own operating system. That would be a silly thing to do. What I like to say is that we're a mix of secret source and open source. The open source is Linux, and the secret source is the software that we sprinkle in. Running inside that instance is a container. Now you can actually run multiple containers on the same system. That's what I'm doing here. Yeah. And that can be quite useful for modest deployments where you have, I don't know, a single SQL server with a web server on the front of it and some sort of web browser that needs to access it. Yeah. And that works very fine. A lot of our customers call that a droplet in the box, where one appliance just does everything for them. For larger customers and for more scaled out deployments, we can run multiple Droplet server appliances. I've got 2 here and I've got a third one. And we also support for free a load balancing system. Now, to be fair, if you are running in Azure or AWS, most of our customers are going to use the built-in load balancers services provided by the cloud vendor. If you're a super large corporate, in-house, you may already have a commercial load balancer, say like F5 and Big IP. Yeah. But if you're an organization that has on-premise requirements, but you don't have a load balancer, this load balancing technology ships for free as part of our product. So we can distribute users across the multiple appliances. That load balancer not only helps with performance and load, hence the name, but it's also intelligent to know if you've had an outage. So if one of my appliances was dead because the host it was running on was dead, ESX01 was broken, yeah, obviously we would benefit from VMware's HA and DRS, but also we'd be able to detect that failure and make sure that users weren't directed to that system that was unavailable. So to quickly summarize, a very small, thin client is put onto the endpoint, and we do support Apple Mac and Chromebook and a whole host of different clients. We're even working on a Raspberry Pi client currently in our labs, yeah, which connects securely across the network to reach the containers. A good example of both together is delivering a legacy web browser, yeah. So this web browser is connecting to a web server that's all part of Droplet, yeah. The web browser, as you can tell, is very old, yeah. It's Internet Explorer 11, yeah. And it's connecting to a web server that's running inside that Droplet server appliance. And it's a good example of us doing all those things together as one. Yeah. So a layer of security around the client, a layer of security around the servers, a secure link in such a way that the only way in and the only way out to that legacy environment is with the Droplet client. Anyway, I think I've spoken enough. And these sessions can be a bit overwhelmed with information. I'm sure we have questions waiting to be answered. So I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that we have in the pool.
We do indeed. We've quite a few questions, which is surprising for this close to lunchtime. I'll blast through them, and if you can fire across an answer, that'd be fantastic. So first up, we have someone who they're a company of about 500 users, and they share and access around 200 devices. How would Droplet be priced in this scenario?
Great, that's a really good question. This scenario is very, very familiar to me because most of the NHS trusts that use Droplet are in precisely this situation. They employ far more people than they have devices, yeah, because they've got rolling shift patterns, people coming in for the morning, afternoon, and night shift, all sharing the same devices. In this particular scenario, we would license by the device because no organization employing more users than they have devices actually wants to handle a per user license model. I'd have to say 99% of our customers say we've got 5,000 users, but only 300 need this application. In that case, they go for the per user model. But when that's inverted, where they've got more users than the devices, we do have a device license model for that particular use case. Does that answer the question?
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Next up, we've got a group who would like to migrate their data center to Azure and utilize AVD, but they still rely on a small number of Windows 7 and Server 2008 apps. Would Droplet be able to help in this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually the same scenario of our big energy supplier. They were formerly a Citrix customer, very big, and they've backed out of that relationship and they've gone down the Microsoft AVD. They hit a roadblock in onboarding on AVD with their legacy applications that was still stuck in the elderly Citrix environment, which they just wanted to turn off. Yeah. So what we do for them is we have an array of Droplet server appliances, which run in Azure, by the way. They are an Azure customer as well. So it's almost like a description of one of our customers, this. And users log on through the access control layer, which is Microsoft AVD. They get a small icon for the legacy application. Unbeknownst to them, Droplet is there in the background. The funny thing about Droplet is we're probably the biggest secret in the industry at the moment. So many people have this legacy problem. Users don't really see a big splash screen that says welcome to Droplet. They just get their application, and that's the way it should be. Our job is to get out of the way of the line of sight, deliver that experience to the end user without them being aware at all that Droplet is even doing that. Yeah. The Server 2008 would go through a conversion process. We run a free POC process with an evaluation period of 90 days, which can be extended, yeah, if needs be, because we're dealing with organizations that have to be very cautious, especially if you're dealing with infrastructure, energy, water, all the things that you take for granted for until they don't work. Yeah, so there'd be a conversion process there. And we would take the Windows 7 applications, got two choices there. They could be converted from existing Windows 7 PCs, whether they were physical or virtual. If there's a high confidence that they could install the software cleanly, we'd offer them a clean container, which they would just install that software directly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So next up, how does Droplet handle the need to access multiple versions of the same software? And they've used the example of Java.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one that comes across a lot. We have a water company that has a scheduling application, which is Java-based, also has Oracle plugins as well. The trouble is that they've got multiple generations of this application, and you can't just install the latest version of Java because it breaks the older version. So you're in a rock and a hard place. There's a couple of ways of handling this, but the general message is you could run multiple containers. You can run multiple containers very easily on the server product, as you've seen already. And we can run multiple servers, multiple containers on the endpoint as well if we need to. Yeah, obviously that takes a bit more memory and CPU. Nothing is for nothing after all. And because of the true isolation of each container, container 1 could have 1.1 of Java and container 2 could have 1.2 of Java. The end user overlays such that they wouldn't even be aware that there was even two containers. Yeah, they would just get two applications, and mysteriously and magically, two things that would normally hit each other and hate each other would just work. Does that answer your question?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we're getting through them rightly here. The next one up is we use an in-house bespoke software and we don't have any access to the install media. How would Droplet help migrate us to a new operating system?
Well, there might be some people on this call asking the question, how did you ever get to the position where you didn't have the install media? But it's not unusual for a vendor to parachute somebody in who, like the Wizard of Oz, makes it all work and then disappears in a puff of smoke, leaving you with something that works, but actually no knowledge of how it works, how it was set up, how it was functioned. And we have seen even worse than that, situations where they've lost their licenses. The business that they're dealing with doesn't exist anymore. They went into administration. And also, in the worst case, they only have one user and one password to get in and out of that system because they've lost their credentials to even access it. So this becomes almost like a data recovery situation because there's no way a clean install of that software can be done. So what we do in this case, in most cases, if it was a physical PC, a Droplet engineer would arrive on site and using a thumb drive, capture that configuration into a Droplet container. We had a situation like this with a major retailer in this country. I will not mention any names to spare their blushes, but they could not open or close a store without this device, and they only had one of them. Yeah, which might be a bit shocking, but you know, this is how sometimes things happen in the world. And we have to remember that the way things were managed back in the 90s and the noughties is not how it's managed now. I hope not anyway, that we have much more streamlined business processes to make sure this never, ever happens to an organization ever again. So often when you enter an organization as a new hire, what you see is stuff that was decided 20 or 30 years ago, and you sort of put your hands over your face and go, oh my God, how did we manage to get here? If it was a virtual machine, yeah, running on any platform, that's happy days. We can actually do that without sending out an operative to the site. We just have to copy the virtual machine and then convert it into the Droplet format and then rewire it a little bit to work with our software, because there are some special hooks that we put in to make things work. But I think the main message is all is not lost. We can help a customer in this particular case. Does that answer your question?
Fantastic. Thank you. And so just the last one, how would we apply a software update to an application that's already installed inside a Droplet container?
Well, the good news is we don't change those business processes. So let's say the software has its own update mechanism, yeah, and the user has the rights to process that. That will just happen as is, yeah. That's unusual in a corporate environment where we usually strictly control when updates happen and when they are processed, for fear that that update could break some other workflow, either upstream or downstream. So we'll come across a number of cases where companies have a update process where it's an agent that sits inside the container, which speaks out to an update server and says, do you have anything new for me? That would just work out of the box without a problem. Yeah. If it's a different direction where the server goes out and polls the container, hey, you, have you got the latest version, yes or no? Then what we do is work out what ports were needed for that communication, and we would selectively open up the ports to allow that to happen. Yeah, it's something that doesn't work out of the box and will be discovered and dealt with in the proof of concept. Because of our security posture of all the doors are closed until we open them, you wouldn't get an out of the box experience with that particular scenario. But those updates will carry on. It's worth saying, often we get asked this question, how will I update the software that's 20 years old? Well, by definition, there aren't any updates. But to be fair, if you work in point of sale with a point of sale application that is 10 years old or 20 years old, guess what? There's updates every night with new offers, new buy one, get one free, all that kind of thing, new discounts. So the data may be updating very rapidly, but the software isn't. And how does that process work? Does it pull? Or does it push? Yeah. So it's fair to say that even something old could still be in receipt of updates. And if it's in-house software, there may be still developers who are tinkering and adding extra functionality or changing functionality as that application develops over a period of years. A good example of that is that we have a major automotive support company. I'm trying to think of a neutral way of saying this. The kind of people who recover you off the motorway if you break down. Yeah. Who have a call center application which they've had running for 20 or 30 years, and it's still supported in-house by in-house developers, and they're still adding and removing and changing functionality to that application, even though it's of that generation. Yeah. So yeah, that's how we would handle those sorts of updates.
That's absolutely fantastic. Well, that's us out of near enough out of time, folks. But I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to extend a special thanks to Derek and Michelle for taking us through the presentation. We will be in touch with a recording and a copy of today's slide deck in the next couple of days, a colleague of mine, and we'll also be inquiring if you'd like to move forward with any proof of concepts, or if you'd like to hear more about Droplet and how it can help you. But thanks again, and enjoy your weekend when it comes.